It's the left versus the right. Debate. Heavyweight slugfest.
Welcome to the left versus the right, or the right versus the left. It's left, right, left here at WABC. I'm David Paterson, your host, and my co-host this evening is a very renowned man in city politics and just all around the country because of his great leadership, Tony Carbonetti. Tony, thanks for joining me.
Governor, thank you for having me. I always considered us a couple of guys in the middle.
Yeah, I know, but I guess we'll extend it out a little bit to
sounds like a plan.
Left, right, left thing. First of all, your thoughts on the struggle going on right now between Governor Hochul and the President of the United States over congestion pricing, and whether or not the data that's come in for the first few months might cause the president to have a change of heart as opposed to shutting the whole thing down.
Well, I never actually understood the congestion pricing thing because I always said, where did it work that we had to adopt it here? So, London tried it and wasn't very successful.
That didn't work.
Okay. And when we were looking at it here, things were getting progressively worse. I see more, empty storefronts in Midtown than not these days. So do you really want to charge people an extra $9 or whatever it is to get into the city? Are you really not pricing out the people you want to come into the city? So I never really understood it. If she wanted to make an extra $1 billion a year, stop people from jumping the turnstiles.
Yeah, that would do it. Certainly, I think just the argument that people are getting to places faster now, and
people that can pay the $9 are getting there faster.
Yeah, they're getting there faster, and it's eradicated some of the well-known traffic jams that have existed. But at the same time, there's an issue about what it does to the commerce in those areas. Do you want to see these businesses now struggling for survival, and at the same time, the governor's saying that the movement of the vehicles is faster, and maybe it's cutting down on the time to travel from one venue to the other, but it may also be subtracting from the city's economy at the same time.
Well, I think, as I just said, I think the economy was heading a little downward anyway. In fact, with all the stores, CVS's are closing. Walgreens are closing. You never saw stores like that closing in the past. It's tough for restaurants to make it these days. So maybe people are whizzing by because there's nowhere to stop and shop anymore. Maybe they should do everything they can to help these little retail stores, not hurt them. So I don't like the idea of charging an extra $9 to get into I just don't like it.
Well, you're not the only one, and it's an ongoing situation. It also has brought the mayor down to visit the president at the White House, which was, that doesn't happen every day. And I thought that was, quite a gesture to try to work this out without being in tech.
Was that about him or about congestion pricing? What was he down there for? Was he
who the president?
No, the mayor. The mayor go down to see. You said the mayor went to see the president.
I'm sorry, it was the governor.
The governor. Oh, okay, I was like the mayor might be down there to talk about him.
Yeah, he might. There might still be time.
Well, and they're going to have their ongoing battle about the migrants. So there's, as you know from being governor, right? There's always layers to these things. You don't have just one issue. There's many issues, and they tend to bleed into each other.
Yes. By the way, where the mayor's concerned, they've got the theme for this week's big show that will be in April, where the media makes fun of the elected officials.
Inner circle.
The inner circle.
I used to actually perform in that, I'll have you know.
Really?
Yes. I played Michael Corleone one year.
Well, I played Muhammad Ali one year. In that,
you got me beat.
And in that I was the minority weight champion, and I wanted to move up to fight Joe Bruno, who was the majority weight champion. And We had a ball doing that show. Those shows are great, and this one is going to be titled "I Beg Your Pardon." So they've already
that wasn't a big stretch, I guess. Huh?
You know, they've already gotten off to
avert a little. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Muhammad Ali once, and I tell people to this day he is the last great American icon. He was a national treasure. He exuded. He was a great human being. I don't think we have people like that anymore that the whole country looks up to.
They're almost like living legends.
He absolutely was a living legend.
So I'll tell you about when I met him. There was an anti-apartheid march in 1986, and it was on a Saturday morning, and I've been in office about 3.5 months. And I was the youngest state senator in years, to be elected. And, there were a lot of people that really thought it should have been them, but we're all standing around. And Muhammad Ali goes into the group, and he's talking to the elected officials. And then David Dinkins, who was borough president at the time, he said, "There's a new young state senator. You should meet him. He's standing right over there." Muhammad Ali comes over to me, and he says, "Hi, how are you?" I said, "Fine. Nice to meet you." And I walked right past him because I didn't recognize him. So
the most recognizable man in the world.
And I don't recognize him from 3 feet away. So he goes back over to the electeds and he says, "Well, I can see why you elected officials have so much trouble. That guy over there doesn't even know who I am." So they start laughing. So then they tell him about my sight disability. And he really apparently heard him that he had cracked these jokes about me. And he comes over to me this time, but they're all with him, so now I know who it is. He takes my hand in both of his, like he needed 2 hands to hold my one hand. And he said, because his speech had already been impaired, and he says, something rather. And I said, "What did you say?" He said, "Would you march with me?" I'm like, "Would I march with you? I'd be happy to march with you."
Of course I will.
It's like I'm being invited to the prom, know?
Right.
And so we start marching. And, as elected officials are, we're all in line. And I'm in the front, Tony. And who's to my left? But another guy, you might have heard of his name, is Arthur Ashe. So I'm walking between these guys.
God.
The cameras are going off everywhere.
A couple of legends. You and a couple of legends.
Oh, my God. But I can hear my colleagues in the back. Who the hell does he
How
think
did he get up there?
I've been in office for 17 years. He's been around for 3 months. He's up there like he's as important as Muhammad Ali. So finally, Ali says to me, he says, "What's all that about?" I said, "Well, people think that I'm too young to be marching in the front." And he says, "I was the youngest heavyweight champion in the world. You can stay right here as long as I say so." And finally, when he was just completely out of gas, they took him out of his race. His people, they took him out of the race, out of the march. And one of his handlers says to me, because he had his arm around my shoulder, and I'm like trying to hold him up and walk at the same time. And he says to me, "Was he too much for you?" And I looked at the staff guy, and I said, "Was he too much for me? He was too much for George Foreman. He was too much for George Frazier. Of course he was too much for me."
He's the champ.
And he's the champ. And it was, I think I saw him one other time just to shake his hand. But he had a marvelous sense of humor and something I think that politics could use these days.
I wish we had more people. There's no one like him. There is no one universally respected anymore.
Yeah, the levity that he would bring to situations.
Everything's become so black and white. It's not enough to be a Republican or a Democrat. You have to hate the other side.
Right.
And he's a guy that just transcended politics. He was, like I said, a great human being, well-respected American. And I wish we had people like him.
Yeah. That they're flashes of it from some people, but consistently.
Flashes. That's exact. Flashes.
Yeah, consistently.
To live that life is very hard.
One of those people that, wherever he went, you'd watch him.
Yes.
And I thought he won some fights because the judges were watching him. The other guy might have hit him more times, but he just had that command. And it's good that here on a Saturday afternoon on WABC 77 talking to Tony Carbonetti. I'm David Paterson. They once called me Governor Paterson for a little period back about 15 years ago, and we're just talking about where we are, the left and the right in this country. And what do you think would be a way to try to rescind some of the animosity and the blatant acrimony? I mean, I've got to say this, you know, I'm kind of on the left myself, but when they had the young lady who was hit with a volleyball, and the president brought her up at the State of the Union address, and the legislators ignored it. Even the women dressed in pink who were, you know, they are advocating for women's rights, wouldn't even clap or show some sympathy for this woman who was basically hurt within an inch of her life over this situation. And a couple of other people he brought on got the same treatment. I just said to myself, boy, civility is gone. There's no understanding about pausing and looking at a situation that objectively we all should have concerns about.
Yeah, common decency doesn't exist. If my opponent came up with the idea, I have to hate it. And I was saying that's what's wrong with today's society. I mean, look at Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill. You know, they didn't agree on a lot of things, but they knew it was the best interest of the government for them to have a relationship. And they had a very good relationship.
And they both liked Scotch.
They both like Scotch. I mean, maybe Scotch needs to be brought into it a little more.
Absolutely.
Yeah, how you don't applaud for that young woman, how I went to the inauguration. I ran into a friend of mine whose wife is a Democratic congresswoman from Maryland. And so it's January 20th, 21st, it was that inauguration period. She was sworn in on the 3rd. The first bill she had to vote on was the Lake and Riley bill. And she was one of 40 Democrats that voted with the Republicans, which means, 160 voted against it,
right?
Then, right? So I said to him, what's the other side of that? And he said, nothing other than anti-Trump. I said, but I don't understand why. And he says, not only that, the progressives are already threatening to primary her. 3 weeks on the job, okay? We can't live like this. I also tend to blame the iPhone and social media because, you know, we all grow up with our, you know, I was a Yankee fan, okay? I was a diehard Yankee fan. It was the 70s. There's nothing I hated more than the Boston Red Sox.
Absolutely.
Okay? I had the Boston Sox T-shirt. When I was 17, I was a freshman at Boston University. How many wonderful kids I met from Boston? Okay? These kids, that's it. The 10-year-old me would have been on social media hating Boston so much I never would have went to Boston University.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? The social media just feeds into what you want to see, and you never see the other side.
And as much as the technology brings us together, the material is pushing us apart.
It's pushing us apart.
And that's really, you know, one of the real issues that it just irks me, that situation. And I was trying to remember, there was a little boy there. He had some other...
He was sick, and they made him a Secret Service agent, that little boy?
For a day, right.
No, he's a secret, not for the day.
Forever.
Yeah. But he's been through like 13 or 14 major
surgeries,
operations, and he's only 13 years old.
They introduced him, and half of the delegation sits there and doesn't show any kind of compassion or understanding of his situation. It could happen to your son or daughter tomorrow.
Because God forbid I clap at the Trump taking care of this little boy. I mean, it's ridiculous.
It's pretty bad. Now, right here in New York City, Tony, we are approaching our quadrennial referendum on policy and presumably leadership. There are a lot of candidates out there, but I happen to know that you have a real concern about continuing ranked choice voting. And I am giving you a public opportunity to express it.
I'm not a lawyer, but I don't understand how it doesn't disenfranchise people. So I guess you go in the ballot and you pick 5 names. You rank them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, there's more than 5 candidates, okay? And if my first candidate gets thrown out, it goes to my second candidate, and so on and so forth. Well, I looked it up, and last time there was 8 rounds. It took Mayor Adams 8 rounds to beat Catherine Garcia.
That's right. After 8 rounds, he had 404,000 votes, and she had 397. So,
but the gap in the first round, by the way, was like 100 and I think
like 105,000.
Yeah, it was
and
over
he cuts
100,000.
it to 7 in the 8th round.
She cuts it to 7.
She cuts it to 7
in the 8th round. But by the 8th round, all 5 of my candidates can be gone. So I have no voice I would have had no voice in Adams versus Garcia if I didn't have them in my 5. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So how am I not a disenfranchised voter? I went to the voting booth. You then get to a round that doesn't include my candidates. So how come my vote's gone?
And in addition to that, are you supposed to fill up the ballot, or could you just vote for, say, Adams? And
you can vote for one and leave the rest blank.
Right. They call that bullet voting.
Then you're really disenfranchising yourself.
Yeah, because
right?
if your one doesn't hang in there, you've got no other support.
But potentially my 5 could all get knocked out. I don't understand it. And someone said, "Oh yeah, but it works in Maine." We're not Maine. We're New York City. Don't tell me something works in Maine. I don't want to hear that.
Well, I wasn't ready for that.
I do have that arrogant New York attitude. I get it. That's my role in life. I understand.
Well, we definitely appreciate it as you were deputy mayor to Mayor Giuliani, chief of staff, and to Mayor Giuliani, and also marveled at what really would be a very good example of how government could be run. Something we talked about before we started the program this afternoon, and you're on the left versus the right, although the left and the right aren't always versus each other. And one prime example of that was the relationship between Mayor Giuliani and the city council speaker, Peter Vallone, and how they were able to work out problems that if they came up now, you would have ostracization and people being unwilling to talk or not telling the truth to each other. And they went on to do that for several years.
Yeah, they did it for 8 years. It was a wonderful relationship. And Mayor Giuliani would be the first one to tell you he couldn't have had all the accomplishments he did without Peter Vallone. You had 2 men who woke up every day saying to themselves, what can I do for the good of the people of New York? And, it was a real partnership. There 51 city council members? I think on the best day, we had 6 Republicans. You weren't passing a budget every year with 6 Republican votes.
Right.
Okay? You had to compromise. You had to work together. And Peter was the perfect partner. He's just a gentleman. And like I said before when we were talking, he had a vision, a long-term vision for New York City. He'd been around a number of years, and he planned on being around in either the council or running for mayor. But people had, careers in government. The term limits, which I'm not a fan of, also doesn't seem I like anything. Huh? I'm sitting. I don't like anything. I think 8 years. Would you invest in a public company that had spent $110 billion a year if they didn't have a 10-year plan? Of course not. We don't have a 10-year plan.
Exactly.
Because no one's around for 10 years.
Tony Carbonetti, former chief of staff for Mayor Giuliani, always involved politically, and you can't really nail him down. He's an independent thinker, and you don't know what he's going to say next, which is why we have him on this show. But it's also why we have a censor button just in case. And he'll be back with me, David Paterson, once the 55th governor. Well, I guess always the 55th
always
governor.
Always the 55th.
And
a great governor.
And we'll be back right after these messages right here on 77 WABC. The left versus the right.
It's the left versus the right.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
Saturday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Saturday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Saturday. Saturday, bring it on.
It's the left versus the right. Debate heavyweight slugfest.
We're back here on 77 WABC as we move to 5 o'clock when Vinny Verdunio will be here, and we'll listen to some music for the rest of the evening, which I'm sure you all would prefer than hearing the two of us sit here and babble all afternoon.
I'm not singing.
No, I'm not either. But I'm with Tony Carbonetti. He is our special guest this week. He's representing the right. I'm David Paterson, who is representing the left. I think if I have to represent the left, I think I should be paid for it, actually. But
You do not represent the far left.
No, absolutely.
The common sense left.
And there's certainly a lot going on in terms of how we judge each other. And I saw something this week that was just a little disturbing to me. And as I think you know, Tony, I'm critical of President Trump, but I'm not always critical of him. But in this particular case, there's a website on one of the federal government websites, and it's dedicated to sports heroes. And it's got, pictures of them and that kind of thing. Well, one of the sports heroes' picture and biography was removed this past Wednesday, and it was Jackie Robinson. Obviously, the man who broke the color barrier in baseball and was, a real thought leader, not only as a player, but after he left baseball and went to work for Chock full of Nuts and was on a lot of great committees and that sort of thing. And it was really disturbing to me that this actually happened. Now, I did notice that on Thursday, his picture was restored, but I'm really hoping that they were not removing Jackie Robinson's efforts as if DEI, helped him to steal bases and have a lifetime batting average of .311 and stole home in the World Series and all that kind of stuff. And I just wonder if sometimes in trying to make corrections, are we overcorrecting?
I think what's happening is the best example I can give you of this is Musk is running down the hallway pulling out all the plugs. And then when someone complains, he turns around and goes back and plugs that one in.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like we've created this monstrosity of a government where all these things are exist. So let me just cut everything. And when someone complains, I will go back and fix it. I am pretty sure there was no intention of getting rid of Jackie Robinson and his great achievements. And by the way, now that you mentioned Jackie Robinson, I was at an exhibit a couple weeks ago for the Olympics, and I'm standing there reading about Jesse Owens. Do you know who came in the 1936 Olympics in Berlin when he upstaged Hitler?
Right.
Okay. Do you know who came in second in that race?
Jackie Robinson?
Jackie Robinson's older brother.
Oh, wow.
Came in second to Jesse Owens. So he was the second fastest man in the world, but that's a huge account. I mean, so they finished 1 and 2. I never knew that. I was reading it in this exhibit the other day. So he came from a family of great athletes.
Well, something that I didn't know about Jackie Robinson until I had to be in my 40s when I learned this, that he refused to sit in the back of the bus in a military situation and was court-martialed. In 1944,
Really?
In 1944, he was court-martialed, and even more shocking than that was he was acquitted. The team of military people who reviewed this whole situation said, listen, he's a member of the military.
Yeah.
You can't tell him that he's going to be discriminated against and fight for our country at the same time. And it was, I think, a marvelous step in the right direction that the Army
So
did.
even pre-baseball, he was standing up for his rights.
Exactly. And he apparently Joe Louis, the heavyweight boxing champion at the time, came to see him because Robinson was so riled up that they'd done this to him that Louis was trying to tell him to let the process play out. Don't, say anything that's going to draw more attention than what's already happened. And he did win, and then, of course, went on to play all those years in Major League Baseball. It was amazing.
And thank God for him. I mean, he handled himself with class. And, look at where we are today because of people like him. People that went out and they fought the battle, and they stood on their principles, and like you said, they let the process play out, and they were proven right.
And Tony, it was generally considered that Branch Rickey did not pick the best black player at that time.
Josh Gibson.
Right. He didn't pick him. He wanted Jackie Robinson because he knew Jackie Robinson could handle the pressure, and he made that deal with him that he wouldn't react to reporters for 3 years, which Jackie kept. And I'm thinking now, the political parties could learn from that.
Yes.
Sometimes the people that we're putting out there to speak for us are going way beyond where we would like them to, to express themselves, and really creating more acrimony and more misunderstanding and derision among the parties. And the reason it's so important for the political parties is that, every couple of years, the political parties face off against each other. We'll have a midterm in November of 2026 on how the first 2 years of the Trump administration has gone. But a lot of what the voters are going to react to is how well the advocates are representing their own parties. And when you've got this situation, like you said, where the congresswoman from Maryland was challenged with the possibility of getting a primary because she clapped when the young lady who was hit.
She voted for the Lake and Riley bill.
And she voted for the Lake and Riley bill as well.
Yeah.
And that's just outrageous. I mean, it boils my blood. And I know I'm supposed to be on here beating up on the right-wing people who come on here, but I think I'm accountable for the fact that, there's some things that have gone on, on the other side that I have challenged, but there are also some things that have to get cleaned up if we Democrats are going to be able to present ourselves to the public and perhaps win back either the House or the Senate in 2026. And I don't see that leadership emerging right now.
Well, as a Republican, I don't think you have it. I think the party that
thanks,
we're
Tony.
looking
I thought you were going to tell me we had a shot,
the party I think I'm looking at from the right and looking over the Democratic Party, what I see is people who, if you don't agree with them 100% of the time, you're their enemy.
And that's always what we condemned,
right?
For our whole lives, about communism, about Nazis, about dictatorships. And then we someone once told me, love your enemies because you're going to act just like them. And I think that's what actually happened to the Democratic Party. And I remember when it was kind of happening to the Republican Party back in the 60s, a long time ago, but when they were trying to desegregate the South and some of the things that the Southern leaders said and the actions that were taken, and, a couple of people got hung and that sort of thing. But right now, that kind of antagonism, I mean, joking around about the fact that there was arson in some of the places where the Elon Musk's vehicles are.
Yeah,
that's not something to kid around about. It's not funny.
No.
And you can kid around about him, but violence was condemned over and over again by Martin Luther King. And I wonder now, everybody enjoys when it's Martin Luther King's birthday, but if they even have a slightest idea what he was talking about.
No, you're 100% right. And what I just said, I look at a lot of the Democrats and I say, I can't agree with you 100% of the time. What did Ed Koch say? Ed Koch goes, I don't agree with myself 100% of the time. that was Koch's joke. But they expect you to conform to whatever they happen to adopt this morning as the new rules. You have to jump in line with, or you're immediately the enemy. You're going to get condemned. I tell my daughters, liberals are the most free-thinking, free-spirited people until you don't agree with them. Then they want to take away your free speech.
It's interesting. One of the conflicts that's going on right here on WABC Radio have been the situation involving the Ukraine and when is the right time to support them and when is the right time to put pressure on them. And it led to a real showdown a few days ago between Sid Rosenberg and former Congressman Peter King. But really, the issue behind it that is that at certain points, President Zelensky is going to have to understand that he can't beat the Russians. He can survive. He has embarrassed the Russians. He's caused them to even go to Asian countries to find people to fight for them because they ran out of troops. But at the same time, he's got to understand that there's got to be a negotiated solution that he's going to have to adhere to, and he's probably going to have to give up a few things because of that. Now, I personally think if you give anything to Putin, tomorrow he'll want something else, but at least we have to try it.
We all read that book to our kids, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, right? That's Putin. He's going to come back and ask for a glass of milk, and then he's going to come back and ask for it. So it doesn't end. My take on the Ukraine is if the president feels we don't want to fund the Ukraine, let Europe do it. I think Putin is a bad guy. I think if his leg is stuck in a bear trap, at least I know he's stuck in a bear trap. Why am I letting him out? Okay, we can do great things. I think the president's going to do great things with Iran. There's a chance we can overthrow the mullahs, and there's 95 million people in Iran. It's an educated country. It used to be our biggest ally in the region, and I think the president can make great strides. But if you let Putin free, he's going to go help the bad guys in Iran. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I would leave Putin in a corner, leave him in the bear trap, and go work on Iran right now.
Yeah, and he's kind of in a corner right now.
Like you said, he had to go to what, Malaysia, I think it was, or North Korea. He went to North Korea for troops.
I'd like to know if they had advertisements, on television in these countries.
Pretty sure they kind of rounded up a bunch of prisoners and sent them over.
New world for you. Yeah, exactly. So we're here on WABC. I'm David Paterson, along with Tony Carbonetti, spending a part of your Saturday afternoon with you. Thanks for joining us. We're going to come back in a couple of minutes and have some final thoughts about the world and how it's turning and how it's affecting so many of us and so many of you. So we'll be back right after these brief but important messages.
It's the left versus the right. It's the left versus the right. Debate. Heavyweight slugfest.
We're back on the left versus the right. I'm David Paterson. He's Tony Carbonetti. He was the chief of staff to Mayor Giuliani. He also advised a lot of other elected officials who used all of his material and never gave him any credit. But I
don't want credit for anything.
Exactly. But, often the best part of the show is during the commercial break. And we just missed an opportunity of where Tony is talking about how he thinks the negotiations should actually go on involving Ukraine and Russia. And Tony, tell me that again.
Well, I know the president wants to sit with Putin, and MBS from Saudi Arabia is going to bring them together because MBS and Putin have established a relationship. The president has to understand when he's sitting in that room, he's the only guy with a 4-year job. Those guys are rulers for life. And they're looking at him as being transient. So if they don't like something he says, they can conspire amongst each other to figure out how to get past the 4 years. You know what I'm saying? We have 4 and 8 year cycles in our country. We're the superpower in the world. The rest of the world, a lot of places have guys that are running their country for 20, 30, 40 years, especially in the Middle East, especially in Russia now. I mean, he's been there for 25 years already, right? Remember, he only had a 2-term.
Yeah, right.
And then he ran, Medvedev?
He had another guy.
He had Medvedev who ran.
Medvedev and
whatever his name, yeah.
And
but now then he changed the law, so now he can keep running forever.
Forever.
Okay. So, that's what we're dealing with. They look at us and they're like, okay, I could wait out 4 years.
And I have to tell you, when I became governor, I just felt like something wasn't going right, for the first few months. And then it hit me that not everybody, but a lot of people who worked for the state, their attitude about me is, he's here today, but I'll be here tomorrow. So, why would you have
Most U.S. senators have that attitude, too.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing that that I realized that it's interesting right now because President Trump is challenging that whole nation. I mean, challenging that whole concept by basically letting everybody that works for the federal government know that I'm here today. I'll be here at least for a while, but you may not be here that much
Correct.
longer. And it's certainly lit a fire, and I think it was probably oversaturated. The number of people who've been let go so quickly, and some of the people who let go were very important decision makers. But the one point that it did make is you don't have to sit around when you're calling yourself a leader and let the situation control you. You can find a way to control the situation. And, whether you like the president or you don't, it was a very creative way to start getting Americans to look at the effectiveness of government and how much it may be wasting a lot of our tax dollars. And I don't know the answer to that, but just the fact that we're probing the question means that he's been able to focus people on this type of leadership where nobody's really safe until he says they are.
Well, I give him a lot of credit, and like you, there are things I agree with, things I disagree with. But I think this time, coming into government, he understands the rules, and he has his own people. And like you said, maybe he's going to break a couple of dishes along the way, okay? But that's why you have glue, right? So didn't someone say that's why they put erasers on pencils?
Right.
Okay. Yes, you're going to make some mistakes, but do you know the old way of doing things? We'd call up PricewaterhouseCoopers and say, give us a study on how bloated the State Department is. 9 months from now, you get a document that would say, over the next 9 months, you should do this. And next thing you know, you're 2 years into your 4-year administration. Just go and do something. And do it and see how it works. If it doesn't work, you try something new.
And that's, I think, also he has he's in a different circumstance now where presumably his term will end in 2028. And so he can play with the House's money. In other words,
he's got to get it done now.
Yeah,
it's
right.
more, I got to get this done now.
Yeah.
So I do applaud him for that because I was never a fan of, go out and study this and tell me what you think. How about we just try? We know what's happening now isn't working. Okay? Let's try something new.
I know there was one point where the legislature was short $500 million. and they told me that's as far as we're going. We're not going another inch, and you'll just have to live with it. They told me that, and I was thinking, this is really, as I'm leaving office, this is really going to be a bad way to leave. I can't think of, how to address this, and then it hit me. They might have left $500 million on the table, but I had given them the Lulus, the discretionary money, and who knows where that money goes from time to time. So I told them if they did not bring me a budget that was balanced by some date, that I was going to veto all of their discretionary member items. The member items.
How long did it take them to find that $500 million for you?
Well, at first they were still talking, and then what I did was I put my senior staff next to me. We put a TV camera on, no audio, and they passed all the member items over, and I vetoed them right on camera. It took 8.5 hours to get through all those 6,709 bills. By the way, I lost the use of my right hand for 2 years after that day. But I thought they would turn around and override the veto. They didn't, because I think I got in their heads. They weren't sure what I was going to do if they tried to override the vetoes. You see what I'm saying? And I think that's why sometimes you've got to play the bad guy.
Yeah. You got to stick up to them.
You just have to do that.
We had a situation I'll never forget when Mayor Giuliani first came to office. There was a budget deficit, so you had to cut something from health and hospitals. And the guy who was running Metropolitan Hospital calls me up, and I'm going to say that we have to cut doctors and nurses. And I said, really? I knew you were going to call me. So I actually pulled your roster. Why do you have 38 community relations specialists? I would cut them before I cut the doctors and nurses. And guess what he ended up doing? Just that.
Just that.
I mean, you got to call their bluff sometimes.
And, life goes on. It's not like, all the hospitals are going to shut down in a week because he made some necessary changes.
The world's not going to open up and swallow us whole.
Hopefully not.
Exactly.
Even though it feels that way sometimes. And so do you think just, looking over the time that you worked in government, that there's a suggestion you might have for people who are listening in this afternoon, or even just our listeners who are just very interested in, politically how the world is moving, socially how it's moving? Any advice for people who want to go into that kind of service?
I like to think I'm older and wiser now. I was 24 when I first got into government.
Wow.
I was chief of staff when I was 29. It was the greatest job I ever had, and I was 31 when it was over. So, but no, looking back, the city was different. Okay, like I tell people, they talk about crime now. The year before we went into office, there was 2,100 murders. 2,100 murders. Say that out loud. We couldn't even conceive of that today. There was 400 and change last year, and people are like, oh, my God, murder's going up. We had 2,100. 19 the year before that, and 22 the year before that. So it was it was in the high 1900s, low 2000s for several years. Now, thank God, we're into the 400s, but there were much bigger issues. What would I look at now? I mean, now that things have settled down and calmed down, you can I would look at school busing. First thing I would look at, I'd say, we spend $1 billion a year. It's like $16,000 per student busing kids to school. You could Uber them to and from school every day for less than that, okay? And not have the legacy of the pensions for the bus drivers, the patrons, the liabilities. It's simple things like that where you could save, but because it's never been done like that before, people won't touch these things.
Now, that's really good advice. What I'm thinking as, we try to make government work is that there is a tendency to exaggerate what situations are, and it makes it difficult for people who are in government because anybody else can get up and say, how bad it is on the subway.
Always sounds easy.
That kind of thing.
Doing it.
And that's exactly what it is. And I think that there's certainly been efforts made, but I don't know how effective they've actually been, and that's what we're going to see in the next few months when the elected officials of the city stand for re-election or are termed out and someone's going to run for their seats.
Every now and then, I truly believe you need someone to come in and start asking questions, because government just gets into a flow, and there's a checklist of what you do in a situation. And I remember very early on, Mayor Giuliani went to a, quote, building collapse. Every day there's probably 20, what the buildings department would say are building, but they're not a real building collapse. The building moves an inch or two.
Right.
It's a, readjustment or whatever. It's not a full collapse. So it was a Friday night, and Rudy had to go see everything. So we go out to Queens, and there's about 80 people standing in the street. It was this building that probably had, 25 apartments or whatever. And the buildings commissioner comes over and he goes, everything, don't worry, everything's under control. The building, there's construction going on next door. This building, the foundation moved a little. We can shore it up. The guys will come by on Monday and shore it up. And Rudy says, well, where are all these people in the street? He says, the Red Cross will come by. They'll put these people in a hotel for the weekend. Our guys will come by on Monday. They'll shore up the building. By Tuesday, these people will be back in their homes. So Rudy says, wait a second. If you can fix it, why are you not fixing it now?
Right.
And it was because, according to the checklist, it was Friday night. So we do this on Monday. He goes, no, you do it now. If you can do it now so they're only out of their house for one day. So you need people that will come in and start asking these questions. Otherwise, government gets into its routine. And it just does things and will continue to do them.
And it feeds on itself.
Until someone says, whoa, why are we doing this? Until someone pulls the plug out. And you have to ask to put it back in and justify why you're putting it back in. That's why I really don't disagree with the whole Doge thing. I think I would pull out all the plugs and let people justify why they exist.
Right. And then if necessary, plug it back in. So here we are toward the end of the show, right where we started. Elon Musk pulls out the plugs, and then when people complain,
but I'm okay with that.
It's a legitimate complaint, they plug it back in.
I'm okay with that.
It's an interesting thing about that, where there have been some situations where they, change things. Number one, at least they responded that they weren't absolutely right when they did it, and they could make a correction. And then number two, there really hasn't been a major outcry from the public when administration has changed its position to this point. We're 2 months in now. But usually, the president says something's going to happen and then turns around and says, no, actually, we're going to do something else. There's a big uproar. But I think people are giving this president the opportunity not to judge him on a weekly basis, but we'll look up in a year when the midterms come up.
They see things happening, and they see he's trying things.
Exactly.
And I think that's what people want to see, rather than, I'll hear from you every 3 or 4 months. At least they think, look, Mayor Giuliani say all the time, we're not going to do everything right, but people know we're doing things. I think actually about me, he used to say, no one screws up more than Carbonetti, but I know his intentions are good. He's like, and that's what we're dealing with, I think.
The issue right now, just involving how the administration is situated, who's in charge, and who is, has carte blanche and who doesn't. Do you think that will hold up for a long enough period of time?
You're talking about the people that are saying Elon Musk is really in charge, or that's all a load of junk. You know that. And those are the same people that 3 weeks ago kept saying, oh my goodness, Elon Musk wants my social security number and my personal data. You know what? Those people every day when they open their mailbox get a letter saying your social security number was breached by your health insurance, or you applied for some credit card. You've been hacked 1,000 times by the Chinese.
Yeah.
So Elon Musk doesn't need Social Security to get your information. He can call the Chinese if he wanted to. Okay. So that's all a bunch of junk. I don't buy any of that stuff.
In terms of just moving forward, what do you think the possibilities are for just our country, as we have a myriad of issues surrounding us, and not just Ukraine and Russia, but some of the problems in the Asian countries and where they're headed. What do you think the forecast is?
We are still the greatest country in the world, and we're going to continue to be the greatest country in the world. All these people they're trying to come here because they're leaving their own countries and their own hardships behind. We're the smartest, most powerful country in the world because we have the greatest moral compass. And I believe we need to continue to be the world leader for that reason. Emblematic
of Churchill's statement, democracy is the worst form of government except for any other. And thank you so much for taking all the time out to be on the left versus the right. And we're going to go think about some things that we really dislike about each other and do another show soon.
You got it. I like everything about you, though. So what are we going to do?
Well, thank you very much, everybody. It's
Thanks
David Paterson. We're going to start playing some music around here now. And good evening, Vinny, and good evening, Cousin Brucey, and good evening to all of you for listening to The Left versus the Right.